Okay, this is one of my videos that is not pertaining to electronics. A while back I put out a video, and in that video I showed how I use my vacuum forming machine to make my own dental retainer. And I've been making these now for about 18 years, and I make them as good as the orthodontist or the dentist would make them. People wanted to know exactly how I made them, so I decided to put this video together. Here's a close-up. This is just like the Invisalign, same material, it's an acrylic. And I'll show you how to make this casting right here. That's my mouth. Alright. In order to make a professional retainer like this, you do have to be very good with your hands. This is not for everybody. I'm going to show you exactly how I made it from beginning to end until I get to the retainer. It's a very strong material. Now, in order to make your own orthodontic retainer or a whitening tray such as this, you're going to need several things. Now, most importantly, if you do not have a way to vacuum form your mold once it's complete, then you're never going to be able to have a retainer. So what I did is I came up with this design. I made this 18 to 20 years ago. I drilled a hole in the steel plate at the bottom. I threaded the hole with a 1/4 inch pipe thread, hooked up the brass fitting to a refrigeration hose, and this hose here connects to my vacuum pump. The ring on the bottom gives it a nice footing when it's turned over. Turn it over, show you the other side. Okay. As you can see, there's a recessed area, and in that recessed area there is this drywall sanding screen. That's the opening for the vacuum. The purpose of the sanding screen is to allow a full vacuum. If you do not put the sanding screen, as soon as the plastic pulls down over your mold, what will happen, this hole will get blocked and you will lose all vacuum. You will not get a nice pull on your mold. So you need a drywall sanding screen. Now, I had an extra ring which would have added some depth to this unit, and I cannot find that ring since I moved, but I still have this other ring and I can still do my molds as long as I have this ring. What you're going to do is once you take the impression, you're going to lay your mold inside the vacuum former like that, right in the middle, and then you will take the 5" by 5" splint material. This is orthodontic splint material. It's designed for vacuum forming machines. It comes in several different thicknesses. This is 040, but the one I prefer to use is 020. I think I got about 50 of these, and it only cost me maybe 30 bucks. And if you have one of these retainers made at an orthodontist or a dentist, you're looking at $200 to $300 or more. Now, these are the hard materials, the acrylics, but there's also a soft material which is used as a night guard for people that like to grind their teeth, but I don't use that because I don't have that problem. Now, for me to make this one, either the upper or the lower, and it cost me approximately, if you figure all the materials in, the sheet of plastic and the plaster and the impression material and a piece of sandpaper, I'm looking at maybe $1. Now, if you're very good at welding, you can make one of these just like I did. Instead of using a 1/2" or a 5/8 rail, I would prefer using a 1", only because I lost my other one. It makes it a little bit more difficult to do the mold. So make sure you use a 1" tall from the bottom up rail, and then you could use the same 1/2". That's going to go over the whole top piece like this. So how it's going to work, once this is ready, you peel this plastic off, it'll be clear. You lay that on top, and then this ring goes over that, and it gets clamped down tight with these clamps right here. You'll have to either make a vacuum former or purchase one, and I recommend eBay because they're fairly inexpensive, and like everything else, they come from China. Now, you're also going to need an upper and a lower impression tray. And in my case, I chose a L14, which is lower, and a U14. You can also purchase a package of disposable trays, but the advantage is these have a little bit of a rim lock on it where it's curled over. So when you go to remove the impression from your mouth, when you wiggle like this and pull, the impression material will stay in the tray and won't pull out. And on this one, the impression material will push through the perforations in the tray, allowing it to anchor, in addition to a rim lock along the top edge. So when you pull this out of your mouth, the impression material will stay on the tray. You have to choose a size that's going to fit your mouth. If you get it too narrow, if you get a tray that's too small, what's going to happen when you put it in your mouth, your teeth are going to be jammed right up against the outside ring, and you're not going to get a good impression. And then if you get one that's too large, your teeth are going to be rammed against the inside edge of the tray. So it has to be the right size tray. I chose one in the middle. I have a fairly large mouth, so I chose an L14 and a U14, and it works perfect. You're also going to need a little dental scaler. And the reason for this dental scaler is when your mold is complete, you may have some imperfections that may need to be gently cleared away. And that's the purpose of this. You're also going to require a mixing bowl for the alginate and your casting stone, as well as a measuring scoop and a flat wooden stick just like this for loading the alginate into the tray before it goes into your mouth. Now there are a few different types of alginate that you can choose. There's a slow set, a regular set, and a fast set. I prefer the regular set. If you would like to speed up the setting time, you can make the water a little warmer. If you would like to slow down the setting time, you could mix it with cool water. So cool water slows the setting. Once the alginate has been loaded into the tray and you took the impression of your teeth, you will then need a casting stone that you can pour into the impression that you just created. And I would suggest using something called hydrocal. The dental stone is harder, it is better to use, but it's harder to get, and they make you buy it in a large amount. You can get this at a hobby store for around $12 for a big container like this. If you cannot locate this, you can also get by in plaster of Paris, but you will have to be extremely careful when you're working on your mold. It is much more susceptible to breaking. The harder the material you choose, the better off you will be when it comes time to working on your mold and sanding it and forming it. Now once the mold is complete, you are going to have to trim the mold, and the easiest way to trim that, I used a blade from a utility knife as well as a Dremel with a cutoff wheel. By having this cutoff wheel, it will be very easy to remove the acrylic material from your casting once it's complete. You're also going to need a few sheets of sandpaper, preferably like 100 grit and a 220. Now when you remove the castings from your impression trays, the top edge is going to be very uneven and rough. You have to make that smooth like you see here. This is extremely flat, extremely smooth. You're going to take this on a flat, super flat surface such as a countertop, and you're going to lay a piece of 100 grit sandpaper, and you're going to lay it down like this and gently go back and forth, and you're going to go, after you get it fairly flat, you'll switch to 220 and smooth it out, and you're done. The reason for that, if you don't smooth that out and you lay that in the vacuum former, what will happen as soon as the vacuum pulls the material over your casting, it will break the casting in half. You have to ensure the part that sits on the bottom is perfectly flat, just like this. See, when I move it around, it doesn't rock. That's what you want. If you put yours down, it rocks around, you're going to have a problem. As soon as you go to vacuum form it, it will crack. So make sure when you lay it in there, it doesn't move, it's nice and flat, it doesn't rock, and you're good to go. Now in order to pull the vacuum down, you will also require a small vacuum pump. Now I've had this one for many years when I was installing AC systems, and this is just a single stage Robinair vacuum pump. I'll unscrew this cap, and then what I do, I take this hose and I thread it on there. And in addition to the vacuum pump, you will also need a heat gun. The heat gun will soften up the acrylic material make it extremely pliable, and when it's ready to go, you will then turn on the switch of the vacuum pump and it will draw down the acrylic material over your casting. Okay, so now that we have everything that we need, I'm going to show you now how we do this. So I will be using this one when we make the impression, which will be another one just like this that you see here. You can see you get very good detail on your molars, premolars, and even you can see your gums, everything. Highly detailed impression. Now before you take an impression of your mouth, it is critical that you brush your teeth and you floss and you scrape away any pieces of food that may be on your teeth or lodged between your teeth, because that will affect the outcome of the mold. Now the primary reason why I made the retainer is because a few nights a week I will sleep with this retainer in my mouth. And what it does, it ensures that your teeth never move, because your teeth over time will move, especially if you have wisdom teeth that are pushing on your molars, shifting all your teeth around. That's one reason. And the second reason is I like to use it as a whitening tray, because you cannot get a better whitening tray than this. And if I notice that one of my teeth are starting to move slightly out of line, I also have the ability to push that tooth back into alignment. Now this particular alginate that I will be using is a special type. I got a good deal on this from a dental supply house. And how this works, you mix it up for about 30 to 45 seconds. You wait for the color to turn pink. You then load the material into the tray, and then when it starts to turn white, you insert it in your mouth, and then you push it up tight as you can against your teeth, and you hold it there. 3-4 minutes later, you can remove the tray. Now before you use the alginate, shake it up really good, tumble it around, fluff it up. And when you mix this, now I found the ratio that's best, and I used 4 tablespoons of water to 6 tablespoons of the powder. You do not want a loose consistency, you don't want it flowing, you want to have it thick enough that when you push it into the tray, it stays exactly where you put it. This is the consistency you want, like that. It's nice and thick, you can see it holding. This is ready to be loaded into the tray just like that. That's the consistency, and you can see right now it's turning white, so this should have already been in the tray, and right now is when you put it into your mouth because it's turning white. Okay, as you can see, it's white, it's already set up, 3 minutes have gone by, it's hard. I could probably pull the whole thing out in one piece, and there it is. So once you load the alginate into the tray, you're going to push this up very, very tight, or you're going to push it down very tight, depending on if you're doing upper or lower. And you're going to hold it there and don't move for about 3 minutes. After 3 minutes has passed, you grab the end of this and you're going to wiggle and pull down to remove from the top as you're wiggling, or you're going to wiggle and pull up to remove from the bottom. And then you're going to have a perfect impression just like this. Now the next step is to rinse it thoroughly with water. You're not going to hurt it. This is very strong, this stuff. Now that it's rinsed, now before you pour the mold, just go over the whole thing and inspect it, make sure there's no defects. And then you're going to blow all the water out of here. Make sure there's no water. If there's any residual water when you pour the casting material, you're going to end up with weak spots or spots that are missed. So you're going to blow all the water out. You can put your mouth very close and just blow to get all that water out of there and shake it. And once you don't see any more pooled water, then you're ready to pour the casting material. Okay, once the mold has been removed from your mouth and you rinse it all out clean, and then you blow all the excess water out of the mold, you're going to want to dam off the end by your molars. And how I do that is very simple. I just put a piece of electric tape across the back, and now when I pour the mold, the material will not run out. When you mix up whatever material you're going to use, you do not want to make it too thick, because it has to be flowable. It has to be able to flow into all these spaces. And as you pour, you want to carefully get a Q-tip just like this and push down gently towards the bottom to get rid of any air bubbles. And then once it's all in, you're going to hold it on the edge of a counter and tap, 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 tap. Keep tapping, and you're going to see all the air bubbles rise to the surface. Keep tapping and don't stop. Just keep going like that, and the vibration will allow the air bubbles to rise to the surface. And by doing that, you will not have any voids on the crowns of your teeth or on the incisal edges. Alright, so my casting material, I will be using hydrocal. And for a hard, smooth mold with a lot of detail, I will be using 1/4 cup of water. I'll add to that 1 tablespoon of white glue, and then I'll be adding 1/2 cup of hydrocal to that mixture. Okay, the water's in, 1/4 cup. I'm now mixing in the Elmer's glue, the white glue. Make sure the glue is thoroughly dissolved in the water before adding the hydrocal. Alright, the glue is now thoroughly dissolved into the water. I will now add the hydrocal to the mixture and just mix it up thoroughly and then pour it into my mold. Okay, pour it into the mold quickly. Good. Now I'm going to grab this and gently just go down to the bottom. Make sure there's no voids. Tap, tap, tap. You're going to keep tapping, just keep tapping, and then once there's no more air bubbles rising to the surface, you're good to go. You're going to let this cure overnight. Okay, once the casting has been allowed to dry overnight, you can see that it dried nicely. There's a separation between the alginate and the casting, indicating that it dried. Then the next step will be to release the casting from the alginate in the impression tray. You're going to get a utility knife and hold it at an angle, and you're going to cut the alginate away up to the rim lock all the way around. Once that's removed and the rim lock is removed, you should be able to carefully remove the casting from the impression. I cut away the impression material that was against my palette, and I cut away all the edges around the rim lock. If you're using a very hard impression material, then you're not going to have to worry about damaging it. And this hydrocal is strong when it really sets up good, but if it's not totally set, you can actually damage your mold. So if you feel that the mold isn't fully cured yet, do not remove it, because you may break off one of the tips of the teeth. Once you cut away all the edges, you should be able to easily grab it with your thumb and the front and gently angle it and pull it out of the mold. If you're using a dental grade casting material, which is extremely hard, you're not going to have to worry about damaging it. But when you're using these other materials like hydrocal, you do have to be a little careful when you're removing it. The casting has been removed from the impression tray, and there's the result. Perfect. See a lot of detail. Now the next step, and it's very important, you're going to have to look at your mold, and for instance, you can see right here these little tiny little bubbles. Now these little bubbles, what you're going to have to do is take the scaler and you're going to gently scrape them away. You're going to go around each tooth. You're going to make sure it's nice and clean like it is right over here. See how smooth that is? Now the next step is to take your scaler, and it's very important. You have to clear away any of these imperfections, like this little bubble here. You can see how nice and smooth the gum line is where it meets the tooth in this area. So you're going to go around every single tooth, and like right there's a little bubble. Yeah, pop that off. You can see on the cusp of this tooth right here there's a little spot that has to be popped away. And right between the front teeth, that's got to be popped out. So once that's all cleaned nicely, then we can go to the next step. Okay, all the little imperfections have been scaled away. take a closer look. Alright, so now we are ready to make this bottom here nice and flat. Now to ensure the bottom is flat, take a hard flat surface like a Formica countertop, granite, glass, anything. Lay your sandpaper on it, gently push down, and sand back and forth until the bottom is nice and flat and then the mold no longer rocks. Gently push down with this finger and my other finger and drag it back and forth. Do this just long enough to ensure the bottom is flat. Okay, you can see the edges. Okay, let's take a peek. See, these edges are all getting flat. And you'll know when you're done when you put it on a counter and it doesn't rock. Hear that rocking? That's no good. That's going to crack when you go to form it. So just lay it on something flat, move it around. If it doesn't rock, you're good. Okay, this casting is now ready. You can see it doesn't move anymore. Now ready to be vacuum formed. So we will now go to the vacuum former and I'll show you how that's done. Okay, I have the cast in the middle of my vacuum former. Sits nice and flat. Have my upper ring already. The vacuum pump is connected. Clamps will hold down the ring tightly. And I have my heat gun already. Now for this retainer I'll be using .020, which is 20 thousandths of an inch splint material. Ordinarily I would be using .030, but I ran out, so I'll be using .020. I'm now going to apply the heat. Once the material becomes very, very pliable, I will then turn on the vacuum former. It will draw down the shape over the mold, and then I'll let it cool a little bit, and then I'll turn the vacuum pump off. We're almost there. And we're getting ready to turn it on. Apply a little more heat at the bottom. This protects the plastic from melting all the way through. Let it run a minute, it'll cool, and then I can shut the pump off. Now turn the vacuum pump off, and we're complete with that stage. Just remove the clips. This is like the 100th time I've been doing this over the past 18 years. Take off the top upper ring. And that is one beautiful vacuum formed retainer you see there. Everything is nice and close. Perfect form around the teeth. Down into the cusps. Everything's perfect. Now the next step is going to be to get my Dremel. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is take a scissor and cut away all this excess to make it easier to hold in my hand to work on. And then I'm going to take a Dremel and cut about 1/8 of an inch below the base of the molars and the teeth, and just a little below the gum line all the way around. And the same in the front. I'll cut just above the gum line, and then I'll be smoothing out those edges. You don't want any rough edges. because it will irritate the inside of your mouth. So it must be no rough edges, and that's where the 220 wet and dry sandpaper will come in, just to smooth that edge out when you're all done getting it trimmed. Okay, I'm now ready to trim off the excess. At this stage of the game, it doesn't make a difference if you damage the casting. I could just make a new one in no time, so I'm not worried about it. Cut it all the way around, just like this. And here, I just make a little V like that. Alright. Now the cutting is going to be done by hand using the Dremel with the cutoff, as well as a utility knife blade. I use that for doing fine trimming. Now on a slow speed. I'm good to there. Okay, let's take a look at this. This whole section should be off perfectly. See how nice that looks? Coming away clean. In here I usually use a utility knife blade just to get it nice and close. We're down just around the palate area. Any little point like that at the end will be shaved down with the utility knife, and I'll sand the edges nice and smooth. Go a little further. Let's cut this away. Okay, now the rest of that I could do with the utility knife. Just clean away a little bit. Okay, so now that that's all clean, we will now remove the retainer. Lift away the retainer. Is the mold perfect? Okay, the retainer is complete. All the edges are cut to exactly where I want them. And it's also a good idea to use a very tiny pair of curved scissors like this. You get these in a little grooming kit. They cut perfectly on the all the way up to .040. They'll cut perfectly. And when you're done getting everything trimmed perfect, you want to make sure there's no rough edges over here, because that'll irritate your gums. So you get this 220 grit wet dry sandpaper, and you go over the whole thing. And what you do is you get the wet dry 220 grit sandpaper, and you just smooth out that edge all the way around so you have no rough edges. This cost me right around $1 versus $200 to $300 for one, and about an hour and 15 minutes total of my time, excluding the waiting for the casting to dry. I'm now going to take this and try it on, make sure it's a nice fit, and that's it. Alright, the retainer. There you go, perfect fit.